Surumani Manzi is a 30-year-old Ugandan who has attempted to wear many hats, at least in the past decade. I am an engineer by profession, so I build shelters and other infrastructure for a living. But I also try to remain an active citizen. And outside of my vocation, I attempt to participate in social and cultural live streams of the Ugandan society. So I write poetry, I write stories, I have a blog where I've been writing essays for a long time. And generally I try to remain alive to the mood and the beat of Ugandan life. Yes, this little collection that you see here is my first published work. I have been putting together several manuscripts for many years, but I did not feel that they were ready to see the light of day. But last year I was able to finally make that step and put out my maiden short story collection, which is my first book. Why do I write? Several reasons, but primarily I would like to communicate ideas of what I feel should be solutions to many of the social ills that I have observed, because writing is the end product of an observation process, at least in my thinking. And so I hope that through my stories or through my poems or through my essays, I can make cases for how we can improve our lives in the various facets that they involve. It is a little young, a little immature, but in the past few years, because we are a young population that has come of age in the past decade or so, I think that there is a growing interest and there is an expanding culture of reading. Writing perhaps not. Social media has helped, but because I belong to the more orthodox school, I feel social media has created an opportunity for quantity, and yet it has diminished quality. But I think one can never have a perfect situation. So instead of being too hard on the culture, I think it is best to just appreciate the growing interest in ideas and the leveraging of social media as a platform for people to write more frequently and also have access to reading material easily. Yes, I think I prefer poetry because that is my first area of literary exploration. I was a poet first before I felt confident enough to write longer works. And poetry is also something that one can do in the moment. It's easier to get done with a poem during a lunch break or in the spur of the moment, while a story would be a more purposeful, more deliberate work. So for the ease of it and for the spontaneity that it implies, I prefer poetry. But ideas are better communicated through prose, so as of necessity, it serves its purpose too. Books, I haven't incidentally read any of the more recent publications, especially by more famous names like Jennifer Makumbi, but I have had a number of people whose opinions I respect say that her book is good or her books have been good. But for the older books, I would say I loved Kosi Achifefe, which was one of the set books we read in school. And I think the more modern poetry is interesting work. For non-fiction, my favorite writer is a gentleman called David Kaiser. He has to put out a book yet, but his collection of literary reportage and journalistic work is really formidable. He's a very brilliant mind and he's a flawless writer, in my opinion. Freedom of speech has certainly had its domain shrink over the past several years, and politics abhors the liberty of conscience that freedom of speech implies. So as the political space has grown smaller, so have all other freedoms and liberties suffered, and freedom of speech has not been spared. So I think that as we go forward in the next few years with a political incumbent who seems unwilling to permit transition, things are likely to get worse rather than better. It took me a few months to put the stories together. Some were older, inchoate and incipient stories that I managed to put some finishing touches to. Others were stories that were generated from scratch. So it took me about 7 months all together to put the stories together, and I feel that this was a manuscript worth presenting to a publisher. But it was an enlightening experience because I tried to pay attention to the finer detail, the nitty-gritties of everyday Ugandan life. Look at what people are doing in the informal sector, look at what families are going through on a day-to-day basis, housewives, children, the breadwinners. What are the dynamics that inform and inspire each of our interfaces in those various spaces that we exist in as Ugandans? And so I tried to bring out an authentic flavor in each of those things which ordinarily we would take for granted and not pay keen attention to. Everything begins in the institutions of learning, I believe. Elementary school, middle school, high school, and to an extent universities, but usually cultures and habits are already formed by the time learners come to university. So we need to invest more in changing the attitudes of children in the lower grades of school to literature. We need to expose them to books better, because based on my own experience, that is where the love started. I was able to just overcome the intimidation that many volumes of work present, because I had books in my childhood environment and I was able to read. So we need to populate primary school libraries with books, and we need to be deliberate about creating time in the school curriculum for children to read books, to interact, to try and interpret, and develop a love for language and a love for stories. This is something that is steeped deep in African culture. Fireside storytelling, which was almost a daily ritual. And so we need to find a way of integrating that into the formal school curriculum, which has largely become a mechanistic and very robotic exercise. And literature has the potential of rehumanizing the learning process as it was pre-colonially. So the Were Ugandan, whose cover I am showing right now, is a short story anthology. There are 15 short stories compounded in this collection, and they basically just speak to the Ugandan story and the Ugandan reality. The book is selling at 40,000 UGX. It is available in bookshops around town: Aristoc, Ugandan bookshop and all the other places where you can access literature. We have tried to supply them with copies. And Tebe also has several copies in its bookstores and bookshops there. And you can always find us on Facebook and Twitter. Surumani, Manzi, or Were Ugandan book has pages on each of those platforms. Or you can contact the publisher themselves, African Studies Bookstore, who are headquartered at the Uganda Museum, and get yourself a copy. Yeah, I just want to express my gratitude for being on the platform and say that such platforms are necessary, and it heartens me to observe that you are, as a young Ugandan person, taking the initiative to open up spaces more, taking an interest in indigenous and native Ugandan literature. And I think that we need to build ecosystems that are self-supporting, and that is the way we can have a very sustainable industry built around literature in the country.
Yes, I have a book club with my girlfriend. It's just the two of us.